It's a pleasure to receive you in the House of Sustainable Agriculture of America. Therefore, we welcome you in occasion of the Digital Agriculture Week 2024. And for this reason, we greet the members of the main table, Excellent Fernando Matos, Minister of Agriculture and Livestock of Uruguay, who is joining us virtually. Honorable Manuel Otero, General Director of the American Institute for Cooperation and Agriculture, ICA, who will join us by means of a video. Loide, Director of Cooperation for Agriculture, ICA, and Mrs. Andrea Gardia Saval, co-leader of the Consultant Group on Agriculture Research, CENGIAR, ICT for Art, manager of the International Center for uh, Breeding Maize and Wheat, Monica Rodriguez, Officer of Economic Affairs, Agriculture Development of the Economic Commission, ECLAC, and Mr. Eduardo Chomali, main executive on Information and Technologies and Communication of the CAF Bank Latin America, joining us virtually. Federico Garat, leader on industrial affairs, Badger Mayor Crop Science, Southern Cone, virtually. Federico Bert, manager of agro food digitalization of ICA. And we are honored to greet Roberto Camacho Montero, Executive Director of the National Institute on Innovation and Transfer on Agriculture, INTA, Costa Rica, as well as the representatives of co-hosts and co-sponsors and ICA. And we also greet those who join us through the social media, ICA, and welcome to all. And we begin this event with the words of Manuel Otero, General Director of the Agriculture Cooperation Institute. ICA will be sharing some words through a video.
Hola, soy Manuel Otero.
Hello, I'm Manuel Otero, General Director of the Inter-American Institute of Cooperation for Agriculture, ICA, and it's an honor to welcome you to this third edition of the Digital Agriculture Week, an event that we are proud of in ICA. It started very shy in 2022, and now, without a doubt, has been consolidated as a space of benchmark in this matter, bringing together a growing number of key stakeholders of the region and beyond. And the numbers are a witness of this. We have over 100 people who traveled to our location for this event. We had over 150 techs were summoned to this event. We have over 100 organizations, public, private, and allies to this initiative. In ICA, we are convinced that digital technologies are core to face the main challenges of our agro-food systems. These are specific tools that we have to increase productivity, improve sustainability, and above all, to generate inclusion and opportunities for development for people, but above all, for youth. And for that reason, we cannot imagine sustainable development of agro without the integration of digital technologies that will potentiate every component and actor of this system. Digitalization will be the main transforming force of agri-food systems in coming years in America and the world. We know that digital transformation is something unstoppable. It started, it's accelerating, and it's our responsibility to support member countries to be able to move digitalization in their agri-food systems, capturing all the benefits that technology can offer and minimizing any negative influence. The region issues, our main connectivity, alert us on the negative impacts that the advance of digitalization can have if we don't act quickly. For that reason, Digital Agriculture Week is not only a gathering spot, but it's for sowing. And one of the things we were able to harvest is a confirmation of actecs that are leader in America in compliance with what was determined by ICA and what was committed for in the continental framework for food security and sustainable development. The week has been completely necessary to generate this network that grows with this new edition. And for that reason, for us, it's a matter of pride for ICA to know and have relations with the main actecs in the region, and for these actecs to see and get to know ICA and know they could count on this institution and on this network of allies. This week will establish the need to institutionalize and strengthen the network as a necessary step to potentiate the development of the agtech ecosystem in America. ICA, as done in other instances, offers its support to facilitate and support the growth and consolidation of this network that at some point will have a life of its own. For that reason, this event we shouldn't see only as an ICA initiative. We organize it in close relation with organizations that share our vision, such as CAF, Bayer, SEG, Sibel. Thanks to them for the time and the resources that have been committed. And this year we have added key players of these ecosystems, of AgTech ecosystem, as allies and promoters to expand our scope. We also thank Preciosur, ELAB, Endeavor, Speed Ventures, Inventure, Pomona, Frontline Capital, Visalta, Activa Cartier, the Enterprise, Dentafund, SitStart, and TechnoServe. These days, we'll be speaking about crucial matters like policies required for digitization, the role of public research and development institutes, funding, AgTech development, and barriers and actions necessary for greater use of the technologies that are already available. Besides that, we'll learn about innovative technologies that are being developed and offer by the more than 30 ag techs present. Also, what's current, which is AI. And for that reason, we'll have a workshop on artificial intelligence applied to agriculture that we organize together with our friends and allies of the University of Cuba. Digitalization not only transforming processes of agro-food systems, but it also inspires new generations to get involved in the sector that is core for the economy and global food security. For that reason, this week we'll have a special session dedicated to youth and digitalization. Finally, today after this opening, we'll have a session of the discussions on future of agriculture that ICA started a few weeks back in the Congress that proceed. And this opportunity with a high level panel will discuss the role of digital technologies in the configuration of the future of agriculture. And this way we establish a perspective exercise that will support our member countries to anticipate and be positioned before a future that is even more challenging. And above all, we'll have many networking spaces to harvest collaborations and friendships, which are the base of a joint construction, as has happened in previous editions. We hope that from this week come ideas and recommendations of concrete actions our member countries can adopt to promote digitalization, which is agro-dynamic and inclusive. We also hope that this event is a starting point for multiple collaborations and partnerships that will potentiate the development of this sector. And I am sure that this Digital Agriculture Week will be another milestone in our route to the agro transformation in our region, which must be sustainable, resilient, and inclusive. We thank you all for your participation, and I wish you have a very fruitful week of exchange and learning. Now, I give the floor to Fernando Matos, a friend and Minister of Agriculture of Uruguay and President of the Inter-American Commission Agriculture, maximum organ of ICA, whom I thank very much for your ongoing participation and collaboration to ICA. Greetings to all.
A continuación,
And
nos honra con
next,
su intervención
we're honored with
señor
excellent Fernando Matos, Minister of Agriculture, Livestock, and Fishery of Uruguay, who will be sharing some words virtually. Good morning. And it's a pleasure greeting you and participating in this week of digital agriculture organized by ICA. And I greet all the participants that are present, as well as the sub-director of ICA, whom which participated in various events last week, uh, pursuing atomic energy, also introducing all the scientific forum and all the applications of nuclear energy, pursuing the improvement of the productive agro-food systems. This chapter of digital agriculture is so important based on the need we have to incorporate technology and improve processes to improve productivity. And today is a great opportunity agriculture has to advance, incorporating systems that will facilitate the life of the farmers, considering different topics. First, from the standpoint of productive processes, we're facing the great challenge as far as climate variability, the influence of diseases, productivity issues, and where evidently digital technology can favor greatly to the prevention and application of systems to improve inherent productive systems. Clearly, digitalization advances in our society, but there's an additional challenge of the productive system since the existing technological gap is still very important in our productive systems. When we speak about agro systems, or if we speak about one country, we have still great differences within the country, let alone the differences between the hemisphere. What differences there in productive systems in Central America and the Caribbean compared to South America? We have a variety of productive systems that clearly pose a challenge to different applications where the technological gap is even more important if we speak about the avant-garde producers compared to producers who are still using more conventional productive systems. And in this regard, in research from the standpoint of these issues, we have to work more on digital education for even more producers to have access to the knowledge and incorporation of technological tools, digital agricultural tools that will facilitate the life and prevent productive systems that could harm their production or threaten their production, but everything related to the incorporation of rapid information systems. We still have a great gap in infrastructure as far as connectivity. Many regions of the continent and the world are still far from possibilities of internet access, which leaves them in an important vulnerability condition where the digital gap cannot be overcome because of this lack of connectivity. So I think here we have a great opportunity to advance in digitalization services that will facilitate the life of producers. And we speak about facilitating life of producers, it's simply to be connected with public registry systems where many times are required for the production, but many times imply for producers important transfers through routes that are not in good conditions. To carry out a simple process that will facilitate their life, release more time, and allow them to generate more time to what they know how to do, production. Access to knowledge is a very important access, how to be in contact with new technologies, how can we multiply and make universally the virtual training, and how can we make the technological incorporation to be effective and help those who are behind and need the most. Still, in many countries in the region, we have a very high average age of producers. We have a difficulty, which is not only in our hemisphere, but throughout the world, where the average age of agro producer is high. Therefore, there's a mismatch based on the familiarization of digital instruments. Therefore, we also have to make there an important effort in educating and training and providing access to knowledge. So here we have a great opportunity, and I congratulate ICA for this initiative, also the organizations that are supporting this to make a need we have of incorporating better instruments that implies an improvement in productivity, which is completely necessary to make more viable the life of farmers. And the channel of digitization with agriculture instruments are very important and very much decisive to be able to face the productive challenges of the future, sustainability aspects and aspects related to knowledge of new genetic material, and how can we face climate challenges. As I mentioned, all these aspects are core for us to have a future, which a promising future in agro production. But I want to reiterate, we have an important gap in access to knowledge of infrastructure as far as connectivity. And all these challenges are important to be able to overcome this. In Uruguay, for instance, we have here's a long history in traceability and movement control, for instance, in livestock. We are incorporating a transit center to control movement of livestock, incorporating digitalization of property and transit. These are fundamental aspects that will bring the producers better conditions, not having to move their livestock with a paper document, but instead with an electronic document in their cell phones, where the livestock will move with the guarantee of traceability, of health aspects, with this novelist instrument, where last week we had the first digital movement, successful digital movement, including all the legal requirements established for bovine traceability of livestock in Uruguay. Therefore, this is a step we're taking in our country to facilitate the life of producers. And I think there has to be a destination of these policies to have more simplicity to overcome the distances that in agro sector are always long, and try to bring together science, technology, and instruments closer for the production conditions that are beyond just a productive environment are also included with these instruments. So I want to congratulate ICA of this for this initiative. I hope you have a great week that is very fruitful in knowledge and that digitization can bring, and thus have greater expectation, hope, and progress in our dear agro sector. Thank you very much.
Para continuar con
And
inauguración
to
de este
continue with
evento,
the
cedemos la
inauguration of this
palabra
event,
al señor
we now
Federico
give the
Berg,
floor to
gerente de
Federico
Digitalización
Berg,
Agroalimentaria de la Cooperativa del
Agro
Grupo
Food
Ibérico.
Manager,
Bueno,
ICA.
muchísimas gracias, muy buenos
Thank you very
días.
much and good
Gracias por
morning.
las
And
palabras al director
thank you for
general del
these
ICA,
words to the
Otero, y al
General
señor
Director Manuel
ministro
Otero
Matos.
and Minister
Muchísimas gracias, señor
Matos.
ministro, por
Thank you very
estar
much, Minister,
aquí presente.
for
Desde ya
being
estoy invitado a
here. And you're
acompañarnos cuando y
invited
quiera y
to
pueda.
join us
Sabemos de
whenever
su
you can,
intensa
but
agenda
we
y
know we have
entendemos
very busy
perfectamente los
agenda, and
compromisos
we
que puede
clearly
tener.
understand any
Para continuar
commitments
con
you
la
might have. To
sesión
continue with this
inaugural,
inaugural session,
repito las palabras
I
del
want to
director
repeat the
general.
words of the
Esta
General
es una
Director.
iniciativa,
This is
es
an
un evento que no lo
initiative,
organiza
an
solo
event not
ICA,
organized
sino
only
que lo
by
coorganizamos
ICA, but
con
it's
aliados estratégicos,
hosted by
con
strategic
CAF, con CEPAL,
partners
con
with
Bayer,
CAF,
con
CEPAL,
CGIAR y
Bayer,
CIMIT. Sin
CGDIR,
el apoyo
CIMIT.
de estas
Without the
organizaciones,
support
este
of
evento
these
no sería
organizations, this
disponible
event
y
would
no sería
not
posible,
be
quiero decir.
possible.
Y entonces,
Therefore, to advance in this inaugural session, I would like to now give the floor to those who are representing these organizations who will be joining us throughout the week. First, I would like to give the floor to Andrea Gardezábal, that, as was said initially, she's a co-leader of the initiative on digital, on the group on research, CGAGIAR, an initiative called ICT for Agro, and who she manages for maize and wheat, more known as CIMIT. Thank you, Andrea, for being here, for joining us. You have the floor. Thank you, Federico, and good morning to all. For CGIR, it's a pleasure to participate in such event led by ICA, but with the collaboration of such important partners. As you mentioned, this event shows the importance of make multi-sectorial partnerships. We're at a moment where all of us here can ensure that is a key moment in technological development in history. We can now say that in no more than 6 months, we'll have agents, third generation agents, available to train as tutors, to train producers. And at this moment, it's key to understand it, not only to adopt technologies that come from Silicon Valley and try to use these as quick as possible, but also to better understand what challenge this region has, to better understand what we've done in the last 20 years who have been working on this, and why we have not escalated, why we continue speaking about connectivity gaps, why we continue speaking about technological gaps in the field, why other sectors such as health sector are sectors that have advanced much faster, have taken longer leaps. So in this regard, spaces like these are core to start these discussions and to overcome the discussion that we have to adopt technologies and instead have discussions on what we must do as a region, which are the challenges we have, and how we innovate for ourselves without letting aside that technology is coming, that progress and the pace at which technology comes is significant. So we must be aware of the responsibility we have as various actors to collaborate. So this is the time to start collaboration. We've been speaking for 20 years of what we must do, of that connectivity gap, but also how we interact with data. We have been collecting data, field data for 20 years. I know you all know what I'm talking about. We have been saying for 20 years that there's a digital revolution in agro. And I was looking at my presentation I gave in Fontagro here in Costa Rica, and I was looking into that presentation. That was in 2015, and I could use that same presentation today. Believe it or not, I could have used that same presentation from 10 years ago. In any case, for us, it's very nice to share this space for ICA to continue insisting on bringing us together so we can speak or have a different conversation, to have different reflection. Instead of saying technology is what will take us to the future, it's us and collaborations and these events that can actually make a difference. So I thank you very much for your presence, Federico. Thank you very much for organizing this event. And I invite you to this week. Let's think out of the box. And the discussion is about technology will take us and resolve the issues we've had for 20 years. Someone raise their hand and say, let's think different. There's a different way to do it. And this does not mean since we're going to speak about AI, is not having a denial that this will not save us, but it's the opposite idea. How do we use it well if we have not? So I hope to start this week with a blunt statement, but that's a reality. So what I invite you to do is think out of the box and have the conviction that we have in CGIR and the digital innovation stance, that we do have the possibility to do it different. There's ways and routes, but we have to think out of the box. Thank you. Thank you, Andrea, for your words. And I want to give the floor to Eduardo Chumali.
He's going to speak from Uruguay, and he's the main exec in IT technologies from the Development Bank of Central America and the Caribbean, CAF. It's a pleasure to have you here, Eduardo. Thank you, Federico. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you, even if just online. I was unable to be with you in presence, but it's a pleasure to share this space with experts on digital technologies. And it's important to celebrate this important forum for a very important topic for Latin America, which is how can we leverage the opportunities from digitalization for the sector of agriculture and the key role played by technologies in this field, because we're at a key moment in agriculture in our region. The global demand for food items continues to increase, while resources like land and water become more scarce. The impact of climate change, the price of raw materials, and the pressures to increase productivity highlight the need to radically transform the way in which we produce our food. And it's here where digital transformation plays a key role. And here, perhaps, Andrea, I apologize, but the solution exists. But the problem is we don't leverage them. And this has multiple aspects to it. We speak of a digital gap. We have rural areas excluded, 80% of connectivity opportunities, even though there is available technology. And now more than ever, technology provides us with powerful tools that allow us to optimize productivity and sustainability. We have the Internet of Things, we have agricultural robotics, AI, and this is improving the logistics and the distribution of products. It's a fundamental difference compared to 20 years ago. These technologies today are within everyone's reach at a relatively low cost. And really, the opportunity at hand here is to figure out how, based on alliances, we can implement these types of projects regardless of the scale, whether it's micro, whether it's more at the department level, or even at a country level. In this case, it's worth to highlight this role of these emergent companies to solve specific problems in the agricultural and livestock sector, because they are a fundamental engine for innovation, especially the key role in our region, a region where the greatest challenge for economic growth is productivity. And here we're not speaking simply of sensors to measure soil in real time, humidity, temperature, but we need to speak of digital platforms that connect the producers with the markets in an ecosystems that offers solutions that increases efficiency and increases sustainability. However, I think that what is most worth highlighting with Federico in this forum is that this transformation cannot be achieved on our own. We need cooperation between governments, researchers, investors, development banking, and farmers themselves is essential to really make this sustainable. Each stakeholder has a key role. Governments, beyond creating the appropriate regulatory frameworks and offering incentives for innovation, the private sector needs to keep investing in innovation. The academic realm needs to really continue tackling these challenges, even in terms of human capital and resources to implement these technologies in the fields. And farmers need to be part of this change and implement these technologies in their daily efforts. Another element that is worth noting is to ensure that the productive sector have access to financing for these solutions. We're speaking of every realm, not just seed capital, but also for it to evolve to different stages. And within this realm, it's important to keep consolidating efforts to create innovation ecosystems focused on agriculture, incubators, and also the capital necessary for them. Last but not least, we need to mention, as we mentioned before, the need for training for farmers. This digital revolution will only be successful if farmers, especially small-scale farmers, can understand and leverage these digital tools. Digital technological inclusion is not just in terms of access, but of know-how and training. Therefore, looking to the future, we have a historic opportunity in Latin America. We can become a global reference in agricultural technological technologies, and our sector will become more competitive, more resilient, and more inclusive. In conclusion, I simply want to invite all of you, ladies and gentlemen, to continue working together, cooperating, creating synergies. The path ahead is lengthy, possibly 10, 15 more years. But I am fully convinced that if we really align ourselves from our own sectors gathered here today, we can envision a more efficient, sustainable, and more resilient realm of agriculture in the future. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Eduardo, for your kind words. And through you, we want to extend thanks to CAF. Just in a few minutes of having started this event, we can see some complementary issues. And that's why we're here. We're here to think critically, seeking solutions. Up next, I want to grant the floor to Monica Rodriguez, who is sitting here to my right. She's an officer of economic affairs for the CEPAL. Monica and Octavio, it's a pleasure to have you here today and to also have CAF as part of this initiative. Thank you, Federico, and a greeting to all the colleagues from AICA. I also want to greet the other organizations who are participating, and I would like to extend a warm greeting to the winners of this year's competition from ECLAC, but especially for this 2 week of digital agriculture. Your presence here shows the commitment with this network that we are creating, with this alliance between different companies. We on our side, but on the side of the organizations seated here, we try on our own to establish also alliances. You won't hear us speak of many figures here. AICA, ECLAC, CAF, we love figures. We like to understand reality in our environment to be able to kind of structure a story, but your experience really adds value to this story. We, based on these figures, we develop strategies, policies, and we also advise governments. But your experience, your farmers, many of you, hands-on experience that really adds depth and layers, and it helps us understand the priorities that exist. Living with, constrained budgets. As you know, the governments in each countries have very limited budgets, but it's important to hear your experiences and have also alliances with agricultural farmers to better understand reality, to kind of ground our reports to this experience in the field. It's very important for us, for this alliance that is being established here, to continue to evolve. We also need to continue cooperating within the various different realms that we operate from, because agriculture, as of right now, is a pillar to articulate development in Latin America and in the Caribbean. We do not merely produce food. Agriculture is a sector, as many people have mentioned already, that plays a key role in development. ECLAC is an economic commission. In fact, those of us on the agricultural side, there's very few of us. Many people are just economists. We look at topics like employment, poverty, income, and agriculture is a key part in all of these aspects. Also, food security in terms of climate change. If we look at our region, agriculture proportionally is responsible for a greater contribution to greenhouse gases compared to the European Union or globally. So therefore, we have to be a part of the solution. Our countries sign treaties, agreements like the Paris Agreements, where we undertake commitments on terms of biodiversity, etc. Agricultural has to be part of the answer. Perhaps the people seated here do not see the scope of your own contribution. We are here precisely to try to give value to your contribution, to measure it, to prove to the world that the people seated here today contribute not merely to the development of their own companies or to the agricultural and livestock sector in their country, but to global climate action, to protection of biodiversity. The changes that occur here at this level have far-reaching impacts in the region at multiple levels and on development. So the alliance that we propose here is you with the farmers, of course, to develop a more sustainable agriculture, but also an alliance of the people who are more in the field daily with people in the organizations like ours who try to reflect internationally the role of our region, because Latin America and the Caribbean play a role in producing food, play a role on global climate action. Therefore, I would like to close my remarks by trying to propose that this alliance, let's say, if we're here setting up a portrait, a picture, we use our reports, our figures as the great brush strokes, but your direct experiences add layers, depth to that portrait. They add nuances, colors, details. They really give depth to this picture that we're painting up here. So our proposal for us, for you, is this alliance should not be just in this week of digital agriculture, but to make a more permanent alliance. Hopefully, between one digital agricultural week and the next, we can continue cooperating in all areas because the complexity of the challenge ahead of us is incredible. And the complexity of policies are not yet up to par with the challenge. And I think we need to make progress there. Thank you, Federico. Thank you, Monica, for your kind words. And in closing, I would like to ask Federico Garat to speak. He will speak from Argentina. He's the leader of industrial issues of Southern Cone Bayer. We are convinced that public-private partnerships are important, and the one we have with Bayer is a clear example of this. It's a pleasure to have you here, Federico, so please go ahead whenever you want. Thank you very much, Federico. We share the same name. Thank you, Ika, for inviting Bayer to be part of this prestigious event, to co-organize it. This event was co-organized between Fede and AICA for the Digital Agriculture Week. AICA and Bayer have a strong link. We cooperate on relevant topics such as this Digital Agriculture Week and other important projects like Living Soil Latin America and projects related to rural connectivity, education, digitalization. Recently, Bayer in Argentina launched a program called More Agro, More Future, which is focused on closing the gaps that were being mentioned. Because digitalization makes progress, and as it makes progress, we need to work to close those gaps. Imagine if there are gaps in production, if there are gaps in the potential yields and the executable yields of 40%. Imagine on digitalization and connectivity how many gaps there can be. And we need to work on close these gaps. Bayer is a company of technology innovation, and sustainability are part of our main pillars. That is why digital agriculture is so relevant right now, and we want to continue working on innovation. The ideas and this space for relating with each other is very important to develop a very dynamic ecosystem where important ideas can be executed. You are startups, they're very important, but the network proposed by ICA is really valuable when we look at how these ecosystems work. Obviously, thank you, startup. You are really the great companies of the future. You are envisioning them right now. You are an incredible source of innovation. I think that the agricultural realm has infinite opportunities for innovation. When I speak of the agricultural realm, I'm speaking of things like the production of bananas, corn, infinite varieties, perhaps even infinite innovations that can exist in the agricultural world. And therefore, the role of you guys, the startups, is extremely relevant. And I invite you to continue working along these lines to ensure the greatest development possible and to ensure digitalization. In Bayer, we speak of innovation as something that enables sustainability, that enables an increase in production. Because when we have digitalization and when we have data, then we leave perceptions to the side and we make decisions based on data, which is what we need today. We need these decisions to therefore increase this data-based decision making to make good decisions. But digitalization is also linked to the places of origin, which is very pertinent. People used to say, at least I speak of Argentina. Argentina's interior is populated, and therefore we need connectivity and digitalization. This has been very important for farmers as the enabler for new business to provide traceability makes it possible to measure and therefore to monetize achievements, because digitalization will allow, through digitalization, we'll be able to close this circle that allows farmers to be remunerated for their good agricultural practices. In Bayer, we focus a lot on regenerative agriculture, which needs databases to make decisions based on the data. And this allows to optimize resources. And on the other hand, this also really enables sustainability. In Bayer, we look at regenerative agriculture as producing more with less, with a heavy focus on soil health. And that's what Bayer has been focusing on in Latin America and through cooperation with Dr. Ratam Lal. So ICA really has been the enabler for all of these processes that are occurring in agricultural production. And it doesn't matter if it's large-scale production or small-scale, but the digitalization process is across the board, all of the activities of the field. Thank you again, ICA. Thank you, Fede, for inviting us to be a part of this conversation. And I wish you a great success to each and every one of you, ladies and gentlemen. Enjoy this week. Make some great networking. Thank you very much, Federico, for your kind words and for Bayer's support. And to close this first round of opening remarks, I wanted to grant the floor to the Deputy Director General of ICA, Mr. Lloyd Day. Well, thank you very much, Federico. It's a pleasure to be here this morning with all of you. As the chair of IABA, Minister Matos, I'm just returning from a trip to Europe to the International Atomic Energy Agency, so I'm slightly jet lagged. In fact, I woke up at 2 a.m. It's 2 days in a row that I wake up at 2 a.m. because I'm recovering from this weekend, and I take some very long naps on the weekend, and so I end up getting up really early. So I'm thinking about in English and in Spanish, and so I will do my opening remarks in English because this is a very important topic for me.
Starting in English, I'd like to tell you all, this kind of reminds me of home. Minister Matos, we've changed the layout here of ICA. Instead of having a lot of chairs and being very formal, we have, tables of collaboration, and nobody's wearing ties. The director of Costa Rica, who's not in the room anymore, had a tie on, and we made him take it off because we want to make this place look a little bit more like California, perhaps like the Silicon Valley. And as I was listening to everything that's going on and reviewing the companies that are here that are working on all these great things that we're going to hear about over the course of the week, from early warnings on weather, on forest fires, on pests and disease, data analysis, how AI is going to improve biotech and gene editing, informatics and the processes. It's going to improve businesses, field analysis to really know what's happening in the soil, salinity, water usage, etc. Traceability, Minister, was something that when I was working in the USDA a few years ago, and we had the outbreak of mad cow disease, and we talked about traceability in cattle and getting ear tags in cattle and knowing where all the animals were. And we discussed this with our cowboys. They didn't like it. They don't want the government to know exactly what they're doing all the time, but the world's changing, as we all know, and we all know this just from our telephones. It knows just about everything we do and how we think as well. How are those applications going to help us farm better? How are they going to help us grow more with less? How are they going to make us be more precise in order to tackle the challenges that our speakers have already talked about? We have a climate change crisis that is occurring. We have land that's degraded. We have the fact that populations are increasing. So we have to grow more food, and we have to do it in a way that has less impact on the environment. But the positive thing is we're going to get to be able to use all the knowledge of the people in this room and around the world that are focused not just in high tech, but also in life sciences and other mechanical elements that are going to help us meet the challenges of the future. So a long time ago, I don't like to think I'm this old, but I guess I am. I worked for the state of California. I was the assistant secretary or deputy secretary, I can't even remember my title, for international trade and investment. And we used to sell the story of what was happening in California in the 1990s. And I think a lot of that is represented in this room here today. And that was a kind of unique combination of at the time, which has changed and it's spread around the world, where we have the collaboration, or at least the coordination or the network like we're creating here, of research institutions, universities, finance, venture capital, investment, and entrepreneurs. Combining those three elements helped make California the huge success in technology that it is today. And I'm looking, and I'm going to go back home in a couple weeks for my reunion. I won't say how many years it's been, but it's been more than a few. And I'm thinking, of some of the companies that started around the time that I was graduating from college, and some of them from my classmates. Companies like Yahoo, Amazon, Microsoft was this weird place up in Washington that people wanted to go to wear Birkenstocks and not wear ties anymore. Google, eBay, PayPal, and eventually this thing called Facebook. All those things happened right there. And it happened because of the combination of research, of universities, of entrepreneurs, and investment. Agriculture, as has been mentioned, is one of the last industries to really use this digital revolution and take it to the next step. And I think it's exciting to spend some time here with folks from all over the Americas and people from around the world. We have the University of Cordoba here from Spain, who's been working very closely with us on digital agriculture. I think this is going to be an exciting week for all of us to learn from each other. A network is, how do we work together? How do we learn from everyone here, and what new idea might we take to another step? I want to thank Federico, and I want to thank his team. I want to thank for all my colleagues here at ICA, as well as our sponsors and collaborators in this venture, because I think it's really important to establish this network and figure out how we can work together to really harness the opportunity of the digital economy and digital technology to change the way we grow in order to meet the challenges of the 21st century. So we have a big week planned for you, and I'm excited to be here, at least for today. And I look forward to learning from all of you, and welcome to all of you who have never been here to ICA before. You guys are the future. We're excited to have you as part of our family here. And we look to grow this into your home countries, into your companies, and figure out how we can all meet these challenges together. So with that, Federico, I'll turn it over to you. This is the first event that I've ever been to that has the coffee break right after the introduction. So I kind of like it. So let me pass it over to you.
But wait, that we have one more presentation before the coffee break. Bueno, sí, para cerrar muy rápidamente.
In closing, just very briefly, before we go on to the coffee break, while a slide that we have for you displays on screen, I just wanted to show you the week's objectives. I want to, in particular, and thanks to AICA, the delegation from the University of Cordoba in Spain. We want to thank the delegation of Ecuador, the province governments and prefectures of the country, and also the colleagues from AICA, from the various departments who are joining us here today. Obviously, the whole team that worked behind the scenes organizing everything from this event. We will tell you more about who they are and everything they had to do to make sure that this was a reality. And just in closing, I wanted to tell you, next slide, please. I wanted to tell you that what AICA is all about. I just wanted to cover it very briefly. AICA is specializes in agriculture for the Inter-American system of the collective of countries in the America. What we do at AICA is we work supporting the 34 member states that comprise the organization, trying to support them in developing their own agriculture and rural well-being for each member state. We could tell you plenty more about AICA, but next slide, please. We simply want to tell you that AICA focuses on technical cooperation, focusing on 7 main topics which were established by the board or the steering committee, which comprises the ministers of agriculture of the member countries, of the member states. These topics are then established into programs. We have 7 programs, and one of these programs is the program for the agri-food system digitalization. Next slide, please. What's the vision that we have at AICA and from the program of digitalization? First and foremost, what everyone else who spoke before me already said, digital technologies are necessary. Perhaps they are not sufficient, but they are necessary to tackle the challenges of the agri-food systems, to increase productivity, efficiency, to generate more inclusion, to generate more sustainability, to enable traceability, etc., etc. We are convinced that hand in hand, as a necessary event, although probably insufficient, we will be able to achieve better agriculture. We also understand, and this has been mentioned previously by both Andrea and Eduardo, that digitalization in the agricultural realms is just starting, that this story is just beginning, even though it's been going on for a few years. And it will take a few years more for us to be able to identify more advanced solutions, and we know that it will have positive impacts, or we foresee positive impacts, they were mentioned, but we also foresee the risk of negative impacts. We don't want to have a technocentric perspective. We want to have a balanced perspective, highlighting what Andrea was saying. And we want to holistically understand the impact and the scope that digital technologies can have on the agri-food systems. And finally, we understand that with the inception of digitalization in a more comprehensive fashion, the mapping of stakeholders and institutions that used to exist in the realms of science, technology, and innovation is changing. There are many new stakeholders, many of which are present here today: entrepreneurs, startups, investment funds that support them. Obviously, there's a new map. And we understand that hand in hand, by cooperating, these stakeholders, both the ones that existed in the past and the new ones, the region, Latin America and the Caribbean, have an enormous potential, not just to improve agriculture, but to generate entrepreneurship, companies, and solutions that are world-class. By just simply looking at the entrepreneurs and ideas out there, we are fully convinced of this. As mentioned by Eduardo, from the digitalization program, what we try to do is we try to provide a modest support to member states, supporting them to promote digitalization that is dynamic, that is used, that generates benefits, but that is also responsible. And here I included this word in my vocabulary based on my joint effort with Andrea and with other colleagues present here today. Of course, again, we don't want to be technocentrists, or we don't want to see the technology as the solution to everything. But what can we do from IICA's perspective through public-private partnerships? It's to generate the right conditions, but generally, the starring role will be played by you, not us. And when I say you, I don't mean just startups. I'm talking about financing organizations, research institute, public and private, incubators, accelerators, universities, the academic realm in general, the whole ecosystem, the famous ecosystem. Next slide, please. And in closing, the week of digital agriculture within the framework of everything that came before it. We did a first event in 2022. It was very small. It was post-pandemic, to generate the network, to establish some trust and rapport. Then we held a second edition. It was a bit larger in 2023. It had 40, 50 people in attendance. We don't measure things merely in numbers, but more people, the more diversity, the more ideas, the greater level of depth. And this is the third edition, which visibly supersedes and exceeds the previous editions, and we're very proud of that. Why are we here, or why are you here? Did you wonder that, or did you just simply come over without asking yourself that? Well, at least from our perspective, we invite you and we value your presence here because you, from various different perspectives, are starring the digitalization process of the agricultural realm, whether it's from the public sector, the private sector, investing in technology, researching for a university. There are researchers here, there are financiers, both public, private. There's people from the academic realm, there are people who make policy decisions. We're all gathered here today. Anyone who has the responsibility of bringing this process forth into the future. And why are we here? What's the purpose of us being here? Well, we want to promote the digitalization process. But at the end of the day, we want all the same thing. We want things to progress. We want things to evolve responsibly. And this is an opportunity to think strategically, to propose actions, to think critically, to share opinions, which may be diverse, respectfully, and to build based on that diversity. And last but not least, to generate links. to do networking. We don't want things to end here. The 2 previous weeks did not end there. Cooperations evolved from it, joint solutions evolved from it, like Mauricio and Antonio, who are here, can witness to that, and multiple other things. But the idea is for us here to build trust, to build links, so that the true work may occur afterwards. And in closing, at the 2024 edition, as you know, at the start of this event, in 2022, we called all the startups who wanted to participate. We established a jury and we picked some agricultural technologies companies that won. 150 participated, 16 were picked from 14 different countries. Next slide, please. But in addition, there are 9 agricultural technology companies from 2023 and several invited. In total, more than 16 or 17 different countries. I can't remember exactly. This is a jury who had to pick the winners. You can talk to them. Some main topics on the agenda, you may have seen them already. There's a great level of variety. I don't want to take too much time away from you so that we can close right on the clock. You can see everything that's there, and there's a few more topics that are directly or indirectly linked. I know that a few may seem more attractive, a few may be less attractive, but they're all worth discussing, and we ask you to share your ideas. As Monica was saying, you can't picture the scope of your words here. Not all of it, but part of it may have a real impact. You have the responsibility and the opportunity to leverage this forum for that. We value the experiences you bring forth. We value your idea, and they won't simply end here, because ideas will be born here, recommendations will be born here, and they will be translated into policy. This is a hybrid event. We greet all of the people online as well. It's being broadcast on AICA's social media. There's simultaneous interpretation. I must apologize. I did not mention this at the beginning, but we have simultaneous interpretation into English, Spanish, and Portuguese, all possible combinations. Whoever needs a headset, you can ask for it. Those who are connected online, just pick the AICA Spanish channel for Spanish, English for English, and Portuguese for Portuguese, of course. We kind of arranged the tables in a different fashion. We want this to be as horizontal and informal as possible within the framework of our multilateral organization. And you can sit wherever you want. In fact, we invite you to sit down at different tables so that you can create different friendships on different days. And in closing, 2 things that I wanted to mention, and that I am certain that the co-organizers will share me in these following words, is first of all, we want to thank you. We know that everyone gathered here today had to leave something behind, whether it was their family or meetings, or they had a shorter weekend, or they complicated their agenda because they keep holding the meetings here, but outside of office hours. So we really value your commitment. Aside from the fact that Costa Rica is really pretty and it's always exciting to come here, it's still always a big commitment to travel and be here. So we appreciate that a lot. And we also know that you have particular interests, because we all have particular interests. We have shared interests and individual interests. It seems great that you leverage this week to satisfy your individual risks, as long as they are related to technologies and their good use. And finally, we invite you to really materialize shared interests, which are, in this room, to promote the development and implementation of technologies without obstacles, without problems, without exclusion. That's what we want. So please make your interests manifest, balancing the individual interests with the common interests, which is our responsibility for being here. Without further ado, we now move out to the coffee break, and we will be back at 10 for the upcoming session. Thank you very much.
start talking to people. Mariana's not here?
She's virtually.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
the other person's not here?
Michael Kramer?
No.
She sent a
There
video.
was someone else
No,
in the original.
no. No, Federico Truco, no.
Yeah.
He's not here.
There's just the three of them.
Yes.
So I'll.
Bueno, les pido.
So I ask you if you can please take your seats and we start this second session. So we're going to begin with the second session we have for this morning in our agenda. And the session has the goal to discuss with the various individuals from AICA on digitalization and the future of agriculture and rurality. This is a discussion that AICA started some time ago to reflect upon the future of agriculture and its reality. In this case, we'll do it based on digital technologies, and then we'll continue and speak about biotechnology and other topics. And to moderate this panel, I want to give the floor to Lloyd Day, Sub-Director General, for him to moderate this panel. Thank you, Federico, and I'll continue speaking in Spanglish. So allow me to change.
Mentioned in his opening presentation, we had a discussion about the future of agriculture at the APRESID Congress in Buenos Aires a month ago. And as Federico just mentioned, we're going to do this through a process of dialogues in the different program areas that ICA covers, and digital agriculture is on tap today. As you all know, agriculture in rural areas are undergoing a significant transformation driven in part by the advent of digital technologies. The scale and potential implications of this transformation for the functioning and configuration of agri-food systems highlight the necessity of establishing a framework of public policies to guide it. A new generation of policies would ensure that a process leads to a more productive, resilient, sustainable, and inclusive agri-food system. And to address that need, ICA has proposed for the 2024 Regional Dialogue of the Future of Agriculture. ICA is a public policy convener and creator. And so one of the most important things for a farmer, and I was just listening as I had jet lag and I was up at 2 a.m., I was listening to a panel we did on broken food systems in Canada a couple weeks ago. And the president of the Canadian Farm Federation talked about regulations and the regulations that he receives from his government or from sometimes foreign trading partners. And he said regulations are fine. They understand, farmers understand that they have to live with regulations. They just don't like to, and I'm quoting him in his eloquence, they just don't want to deal with dumb regulations. So the question is how can, as a network here, when we're thinking about the future of agriculture, how can we think about smart regulations, smart public policies that will enable the transition to a digital agriculture that will help our farmers, that will help our economies, that will help our consumers. So in this process, we're going to have three distinguished panelists. To my left is Lorenz Clerc, an academic from Wageningen University. I pronounced it pretty good, didn't I? Yeah. I had some training on that. And also the University of Talca in Chile. He has a outstanding track record on digitalization, and he's an advisor on that subject. We also have virtually Mariana Vasconcelos, CEO and founder of AgriSmart, one of the most renowned ag tech companies in Latin America. And she's internationally recognized for her work as an entrepreneur. And she's an advisor to the digitalization program as well. And to start off with, we have Michael Kremer by video. Michael Kremer is he's a well-known academic at the University of Chicago, formerly of Harvard. He was the winner of the Nobel Prize in economics and the founder of Precision Development, a company that he's going to talk about in his presentation. So the goal of this is for each of these three distinguished panelists to answer two questions. Now, as you will see, Michael Kremer doesn't answer the questions because he won a Nobel Prize. He can say whatever he wants, right? So we're going to start with him. We're going to reflect on what he says and kind of his vision, which is really based on cell phones, the communication of data over cell phones to farmers in a way that is, you could do it in his vision and his company's vision, or something a lot more perhaps lower brow is how I would say it, or lower key, in which, we can get specific data via cell phones. And there's lots of examples of this in technology now, and maybe some of you are doing this as well. What kind of information can we get via cell phones to farmers? And then we'll go and ask both of our panelists the specific questions and make sure that they answer them instead of just say whatever they want, right? So with that, let's look at the video by Michael Kremer, please.
Mientras inicia el video, les recuerdo que tenemos traducción.
Well, the video starts, we have simultaneous interpretation, and you have the devices on your tables to use these. And if you're missing any device, please let us know.
The world faces interlinked challenges of climate change and food security. Smallholder farmers, particularly in low and middle income countries, are among those most vulnerable to climate change. At the same time, agriculture is responsible for 1/4 to 1/3 of global emissions. Multiple innovations can help boost the resilience of farmers and food systems, reduce agricultural emissions, or both. Timely, customized digital agricultural extension services delivered directly to farmers' phones provide a low-cost way to help farmers become more resilient to the changes in weather, pests, and soil salinity and chemistry that accompany climate change. For example, East African farmers who received SMS messages were on average 22% more likely to adopt agricultural lime for acidic soils, and were also more likely to use appropriate fertilizer. Digital agriculture has some setup costs, designing messages, A/B testing to confirm they work, but then very low marginal cost. At around 1/10 of a cent per text message, it's very cheap to add more farmers once the system is set up. This means that it's efficient to deliver at very large scale. With a large enough program, the average cost approaches the marginal cost as the fixed costs are spread across more farmers. A back-of-the-envelope calculation suggests a 46-to-1 benefit-cost ratio for very large-scale programs. Typically, it makes sense for national governments to deliver the messages since they can reach very large scale. It's more difficult for private sector organizations to reach efficient scale with the subscription model. Farmers can share information, so may have limited incentives to pay for advice. Millions of farmers are already benefiting from digital agriculture programs launched by governments, often working with technical partners to use principles of human-centered design and A/B testing to make messages relevant, accessible, and useful for farmers. For example, human-centered design principles were used to redesign soil health cards in Gujarat, India, and develop complementary multimedia materials to better convey information to farmers. Similarly, in Ethiopia, identifying the obstacles farmers faced when using the hotline and conducting A/B tests to refine the service substantially increased the fraction of users who successfully obtained advice from an agriculture hotline. Weather uncertainty increases risks to farmers. Not only do adverse weather events harm production directly, their risk decreases farmers' incentives to invest in productive assets, constraining productivity even in years with normal weather. Climate change is increasing the variability in rainfall, temperature, and the timing of seasons, creating more uncertainty for farmers. Advances in machine learning and artificial intelligence have enabled vastly more accurate and timely weather forecasts. These can help farmers adapt to changing weather patterns. There's strong evidence that farmers adapt agricultural practices in response to accurate forecasts, and that this substantially increases investment in yields. Estimated gains for just one type of forecast in India alone are in the billions of dollars. The provision of weather forecasts can be an entry point for digital agriculture. This infrastructure can be leveraged to offer more complex digital agriculture services over time, such as services that facilitate connections among farmers and connect extension workers and farmers, provide farmers with information on input suppliers, or link farmers with each other or with cooperatives or contract farming operations that can purchase their output. Digital agricultural extension services could also be combined with other digital services, such as anticipatory cash transfers, which can help farmers prepare for extreme weather events. Weather-responsive anticipatory cash transfers leverage forecasting models, remote sensing, and mobile banking to deliver cash to households ahead of climate-related disasters, such as floods. Growing evidence suggests that providing cash transfers ahead of floods can boost food security and resilience more cost-effectively than ex post assistance. In Bangladesh, the World Food Programme used data-driven forecasting to send cash transfers to households about to experience severe flooding. Households that received the transfer before a flood were 36% less likely to go a day without eating and more likely to evacuate household members and assets, like livestock. Many of these have substantial benefits beyond the country that implements them, making them regional or global public goods. This means that individual governments' incentives to invest in them is not commensurate with social needs. International institutions can play a key role in supporting countries to adapt these innovations for scaling in their context, to refine and test them, for example, using A/B tests, and to scale them to boost resilience, food security, and agricultural productivity in the context of climate change. Knowledge generated by these efforts is itself a global public good. The enormous costs and risks of climate change justify investing in many potential innovations and mechanisms to take innovations to scale. It's great to speak today to many partners committed to innovation at the intersection of climate change, food security, and agriculture. We look forward to working closely with all of you to further develop and scale innovations and reach hundreds of millions of farmers.
Well, thank you very much to Dr. Michael Kramer. It's such an honor for us to have someone of his caliber collaborate with us on so many different things, and we're very grateful for his ability and willingness to share his time with us, because this is an issue that's very important to him. And so we're indeed very grateful for his participation. Now I'm going to ask Mariana first. We'll do ladies first, if that's all right with you, Lawrence. The first question, we'll ask you to speak at length on it. Your reaction to this, your reaction to Dr. Kremer as well, from your perspective. So the first question is, given the inevitable integration of digital technologies into agri-food systems, what reconfigurations of agriculture and rural life do you envision over the next 10 years? What positive aspects and potential risks would you highlight at the micro, the farmer level, and the macro, national, and country scales? Over to you, Mariana.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I love hearing some of those points. I think it's paramount to have data for us to overcome the challenges on climate change and food security. So I'm optimistic about the adoption of technologies in the field. When I think about the impacts and how it will reconfigure the way of life, if we see what happened to us after the pandemic and how the hybrid work became dominant, we can all work from our homes. When I look at these into agriculture, we had a huge exodus from the rural areas to the big cities for looking for better opportunities. Now, with the increase of digital adoption, we have this ability of continue to be wherever we are and continue to learn and work and benefit rural productions. And I think that's going to be key for succession. So my generation, I come from a farming family. As I engage with technology, I see a way to remain connected, to go back to my roots and use technology to stay in the field. So I think we will see this easier and smoother transfer of generations in the farms that are staying there because they have technology and digital adoption, and because they can still be inserted in different market opportunities, remaining where they are. So I think that's a very positive way that might reinforce the distribution of the rural areas and inclusion of the rural areas in the broader economy. On the big impacts of this, I believe like we will see an increase of life quality, increase of income when we see about resilience, when we are alerted on the floods and we have upfront information. I see a more resilient and regenerative agriculture transformation where the data allow us to understand what's going on and respond quicker. And not only that represents resilience, but actually increases performance. So we'll see a more productive agriculture in the same land without the need for continuously expanding the land as we are used to, with better yields and lower costs. So I think we have a more professionalized farmers, inclusion of farmers to more performance and results. On the other hand, the way that I see that can represent a risk is that if we don't make sure that we are including smallholder farms and different regions in that transformation, we will be leaving people behind. And the gap of those who use technology to those who don't use technology is going to increase inequality. I think it will be very hard to compete for those who are not using the same level of information to decide. I also believe there is risk in terms of bargain and trading powers. So the more data we have, the more we can make informed decisions on when to sell, for how much to sell, or even in climate disasters, how to react. And I think if we don't have policies in place for understanding who owns the data, how can you use that data, how will we engage the farmers in that information, the markets and the industries will have an imbalanced access to information and data that might benefit just the industry side, and the weight within the risk and return from the farmer can become worse. I also feel that like within the different actors of the supply chain, even within regions, if you have the global north and global south, the faster we engage farmers into adopting these technologies in Europe, in the US, is way faster than we are doing in Latin America. So I also think that if we don't create policies in place to make sure that Latin America and Africa and other regions have the same access to financing, connectivity, and education, so they can adopt technology in the same way, we will also struggle to compete as a region, and we will be more vulnerable to climate events.
Thank you very much, Mariana. That was a very in-depth response, Lawrence. I'm sure you have maybe a different perspective from Chile and from your time in Europe and the Netherlands. How how would you respond to that question related to the future of opportunities and risks? And then kind of please build off, the very in-depth answer that Mariana gave.
Sí, muy bien. ¿Con este? Sí. Lo voy a hacer en español o una versión en español.
I will do this in Spanish. It's called Chilandés. It's between Chilandés and Neerlandés. Excellent comments. If I follow Garcia Zaval, the future of agriculture in 10 years is the same as 10 years before and today. But, well, it's always difficult to predict the future. We don't have a crystal ball. I agree with Mariana that it may offer benefits, and also Michael Kramer, reduce costs, the delivery of exemption, to do certain observations of climate, of soil conditions, etc. It's faster with data, but I think it's also important for us to seek a balance between digital and analogous. This always happens, as Mariana mentioned, with the COVID crisis. We all thought, oh, we're going to work from home forever. We can sell our offices. And nowadays, we can see the companies are calling their employees back, who are also trying to prevent them from using tricks such as a little device that moves their mouse to avoid working. And I think that the same thing will happen with agriculture. We'll see how necessary that connection with the land and with the animals continues to be, and how much the farmers want to rely on data and where they seek the balance. And I think it's important to acknowledge that there will be different types of farmers, like hyper digital farmers that has the dream of being at home behind his 5 screens where he can manage everything from there, or rather have an AI manage it and simply drive around with his fantastic Cybertruck, which has to be electric because it has to be sustainable. It can no longer be a Ford F-150. And then there will be other farmers who will say, I'd rather use something for financial management, to obtain loans, to figure out where the chain is at, how we can sell at a better price. But the management on site, I will do it myself, or I will always verify the data. And I think we need to accommodate for these different types and allow it, and not to commit the mistake of in the past of saying there's only one type of farmer, because I think at different times in history we did that, and we thought, oh, everybody will be the same as this profile using external modern supplies. But then we figured that they can't all produce this way. I think that with digitalization, we need to avoid falling into this pitfall. So I'd say that's a sort of forecast, I think, is that we will see these different types of farming, of different types of digital farming, which will solidify in the upcoming years. Because right now, I believe we're in that turbulent, chaotic stage. You can see it right here. There are lots of startups gathered here, but they won't all exist in 5 years. Of the selection we made, how many will still exist in 5 years? So we're still in a stage of pre-consolidation. It's very hard to say consolidation in Chilandés. Connected to this, I think one risk, as Mariana mentioned, is that on one hand, I think we will need more standardization to have interoperable systems that can communicate with each other. But on the other, we want diversity, because otherwise we will have sorts of monopolies. We will have a sector with a high concentration of influence, of power in the hands of certain companies. Not everything is always bad, but when there's too much of something, then it can be negative. And since digitalization is not something in and of itself, then when gene editing and other inputs combine, we can have hyper companies that will control farmers. And we need to prevent that dystopia from becoming our future. And when we speak of public policies at the macro level, we need to look at these things. Now, what was mentioned this morning is important as well, and that was also related to data. I think data-based agriculture is good, but I think that there are also certain risks there. Data in and of themselves, in and of itself, can generate wrong information. For example, AI. Initially, it was very racist because it was programmed for a certain target audience, and it did not account for other ethnic groups beyond the ethnic group that was used for training it. Also, all of the work behind the scenes on AI with poorly paid workers located in different countries training the AI. Well, we need to consider, is this ethical or not? Also, the AI hallucinations are another risk. AI data sometimes can create fake news, fake information. So all of these risks need to be taken into account. You can notice that I'm a scientist because scientists, we're often very critical. There's also a lot of good stuff related to digitalization. But in relation to what Mariana was saying, yeah, I believe that this movement can create new interactions with the farm, can create greater flexibility, both for young people who were originally from the countryside and also those who want to return to the countryside. I think that there will be a shift in the change in generation. I think there will be a lot of people who will want to move to the countryside, but we'll also need to figure out how to preserve rural life. But I think we will find a way, because at one point we changed horses for tractors, and I was living in Chile and I was living the national holidays and I saw thousands of horses. That's still alive today. But perhaps we also need to discuss in rural areas, which values do we want to maintain? How can we continue to be humans in agriculture? But that applies to everything. I think that's a debate that applies to every field nowadays. Up to what point do we want to be human? And up to what point do we want to become cyborgs? I think that applies to agriculture as well. I don't know if I answered the question, but I spoke at least for quite a while.
Is that I was a little worried when you started speaking in Spanish, being from Holland and now Chile. Those accents are challenging for most people, but you know, the combination of the two works really well. So we'll move to question 2, but I think we're going to have some time here. So I would just ask people to maybe start formulating thoughts that you might have to ask these 2 esteemed academics about the future, because I think it's important, and you guys are all involved in it, and so it'd be interesting to get the perspective from AgTechs as well. So
don't underestimate her at all, but
yeah, that's true. Okay, well, so Mariana, the second question is from the perspective of ensuring a dynamic and responsible digital transformation in countries. What priorities and rules do you believe agriculture public portfolios should consider? Over to you, Mariana.
Bueno, sí, gracias. Yo creo que hay
We can't
como
hear
la
Mariana. No podemos escuchar a Mariana. No sé si podemos
Can you hear me?
revisar eso, Adriana.
¿No me escuchan?
Un segundo, Mariana.
Just 1 second, Mariana.
Lo espero. ¿Me escuchan?
Sí, adelante.
Now we can hear you. Go ahead, Mariana.
Muy bien. Bueno, los problemas
No,
técnicos.
no, we still can't hear you.
No?
Un segundo.
1 second, please.
Well,
Can you hear me now?
yes.
Podemos continuar con él para hacer un cambio con
Sí.
el computador.
So, Mariana, we're gonna a couple switches here with our
¿Me escuchan?
IT division, and we'll
Okay.
ask Laurence to answer the question first, and then you can react to him. So over to you.
Well, thanks very much. Here you saw what can happen if we fully rely on the digital. Aquí pueden ver lo que pasa cuando confiamos 100% en lo digital. Hay un tremendo eco o nada.
As you can see, if we rely solely on digital technology, you can get a great echo or nothing at all. So, what can the public sector do as well? I think that this can be done also by the sectorial organizations of agtechs as well. I think we have representatives from Chile, Colombia. I think that the sector is organizing itself to figure out what are the public or semi-public topics that are their responsibility. And I think that's very important. And it connects to what Andrea was saying this morning. I think it's important for the public sector to critically take a look at what is promise, what is a hype, and what is reality. Because to be honest, and I think that the lady from McClack also said this, I'm not quite clear on how much progress we've had. It's kind of difficult to capture. This is already a great reality. This is still a promise. Many people say, oh, yes, we have X amount of members. We have X number of adapters, but we don't know the level of adaptation of the technology, the level of depth. I think that a much more critical analysis can be conducted to really figure out what works within the technology packages available out there, wherein perhaps we need to do lateral innovation because innovation never appears on its own. It usually appears with other things. They speak of bundled innovation. Nowadays, bundled innovations is what we should strive for. And I think that's very important also in the ag tech world, because in the ag tech realm, often people talk about this technology is promoted by this startup, and this other startup offers this, and this other one offers that. But we also need to communicate and move forth together. And there, I think that the public sector, but also sectoral organizations can do a lot of great things in order to improve cooperation with food tech, because here we're talking about ag tech and digitalization, but food tech also uses digital technology. They also propose new ways of producing food, but it depends on agriculture. It depends on raw materials. And how do all of these elements connect with each other? I think there are some challenges there as well. So I think that we need to look at it from a systems perspective, from a whole chain perspective. I think that the public sector, and I'm speaking mainly of the INTAs and BRAPAs, etc., they can all help separate what is hype, what's a promise, what's reality, and establish sort of independent checks, independent controls, not commercially aimed, because obviously somebody who's promoting something will tell you it's great. But you can't say my articles are bad. They're all great. They're all great. But what they could do perhaps is, since they have roots in agriculture for a while, with a lot of knowledge, then they can help ground the startups that come from outside. Some startups really know what they're talking about, but many also fail because there's a lack of connection. And I think that there they can help us sort of a kind of technology brokers. Now, linked to this almost monopoly aspect of the issue, where we will all be eating Google meals in the future, Tesla meals in the future. We don't know what Elon Musk will be working on next. Promoting standards in the sector, on the one hand, is good, but on the other hand, we need to also ensure that there's healthy competition. That's also important to ensure that there's something to choose from. And also, focusing on diversity, we need to ensure that the various segments of farmers are tended to. And for example, innovative combinations. So we need to seek, for example, France launched a large project, 30 million euro, in digital agroecology, trying to combine these two realms, trying to ensure that the realm of digitalization, which is often associated with a type of agriculture that is monocropping, what is it called? Single crops. And how can this be reconciled with agricultural ecology that also focuses on the markets, interactions with the consumers, and that way we can really make agriculture as a benefit for everybody involved in the chain for the production of food, because food is also values, culture, convictions. And right now, it aligns itself very well with a value system and a system of convictions, but perhaps not so much with others. And I think there's opportunities there. I'll continue, or should Mariana speak? I have more. No, let's go to Mariana to vary a little bit. Very well. Mariana, go ahead, please. I think we are ready at this point. Oh, fantastic. Very happy. Technology issues. Well, I also apologize for moving, but the thing is, I'm in Climate Week, New York. And so I had to kind of run away from my computer for a little while. I love what Lawrence was saying with regards to the culture related to agriculture and the food system. It's part of the rural life that we need to maintain. This is very evident in Brazil. For example, on the topic of music. And the agricultural fairs, they started doing cultural festivals. This is a very important element. Now, focusing on public policies, I think on the one hand, we need to focus on the development of the agricultural systems. Agriculture is part of a policy that needs to look at food security, climate crisis, equity, eradication of poverty, technology. We depend on cooperation from different areas other than politics that need to integrate certain areas of the government so that they may look at the issue more holistically, more systemically, on how to integrate agriculture. And there are certain challenges there, starting with connectivity, because while there's a lot of technology available from AI, and there are still limitations in technology. And it's still a challenge in our country to have connectivity, high quality connectivity in different corners of the region. Education, literacy, that they may access.
It's very relevant because if you have technology, you don't know how to use it, and to be able to cause the impact, you won't be able to solve it. We also have the financing, since there's a lot of loans, and we've been evolving for the purchase of supplies, but very little for this financing, like Plano Safra in Brazil, to buy technology in Brazil. For instance, we're able to include it in the Safra plan that for it to be used in for technology but those that are, it should be easy for banks to know how to distribute these resources. So, so from the government, we should also attract investment from venture capital, from private equities, for these to be part of the market, and to have regulations to create even more instruments in the financial markets to work with the producers and use these proceeds to invest in technology is very important. We also have a regulation of markets. When you speak about AI, and as I said, and with the increase of inequality because of access to data. So we must regulate how we train these data sets, who has access, and how we're going to use digital technology in agriculture. So we must have regulations and AI to do this, also for the configuration of carbon loans. So we must provide incentives for there to have a facility for the producers to have access to this technology. So I believe that the role of the public sector is core to create these guidelines on how to do this and to increase the amount of public-private partnerships to create investments and solutions of the systemic problems for all producers to use technologies.
Gracias, Mariana.
Thank you, Mariana.
I'm gonna, just to keep everyone confused, I'm gonna move over to English now. There was a lot of really good information from both Lawrence and Mariana in answering both of those two questions. And I'm also reflecting on what Michael Kremer had to say. Michael Kremer was very much focused on really a government solution for getting information, technology, et cetera, to farmers. And part of that, Mariana just touched on that, is really the education of farmers so that they can understand the data and the tools they need to in order to make decisions on whether it's, you know, the salinity of their soils, whether it's weather changes, whether it's new technologies, when to apply them, et cetera. And that's not always so easy. I recall, I don't know how many years ago, but it was here at EECA, maybe 8 to 10 years ago, we started looking at satellite data with a company or maybe a research institution in Mexico. And the information that they gave to farmers was so convoluted and complex that there's no way that a farmer was going to understand that. So we have a whole room of people here that are looking to try to get information to farmers or data or tools to farmers in a way that they need to be able to understand that and then apply it. What role do you see, Lawrence, I'll ask you first, and Mariana, you kind of touched on it a little bit. What role do you see for public policy, for governments, in helping the development of that capacity among farmers? We were talking about generational change. There's going to be generational change whether we like it or not, right? But it right now, there's a need for some of that mentorship of the farmer from maybe their children or from everyone here in order to enable some of these policies and some of these digital tools to be utilized. How do you think we ought to be going about that in terms of working with ministers of agriculture, with ministers of education, with ministers of environment, et cetera, from a public policy perspective?
Pregunta difícil.
That's a tough question. Well, I believe that we often speak of the upcoming generations, the so-called digital natives. And I, as a professor, often say, these digital natives, they can't read even a single page of text. They get easily distracted. They're very focused on audio visuals. They don't like reading text, written text. They don't see a need of understanding basic stuff because they can always look it up. If you translate that to agriculture, I believe that it's great to do some digital literacy programs, I think that certain advisors can play an important role there. There are certain advisors who are specifically focusing on that. For example, this week we will have Jose Valenzuela from Chile who does just that. The University of Talca has a Think Agro Center that focuses on these types of efforts. There are also examples from other locations that are doing similar efforts. But I believe it's also an issue of looking at how much of real tactile knowledge based on your smell, sense of sight, your touch, your intuition needs to be maintained. Because we were talking about the fact that data couldn't be very complex or convoluted, but there's also a risk of having them gravitate towards a dashboard methodology, which is too simple and that does not capture the complexity of the issue. And I think that there we also, in the new training programs for farmers and in extension, need to focus on finding a balance between human observation and relying on digital information. I think that along those lines, we really need to envision how we're going to do digital agriculture that still keeps the human in the loop. And that will also be a role of the public sector, finding the way to do that and to prevent the loss of certain knowledge. Because what's happening right now with climate change, with biodiversity, which is on the decrease, we're trying to go back to ancestral knowledge, not just from indigenous people, but also from the farmers themselves who used to produce using more Western methodologies, to reintroduce this in the current systems. Things like circularity, like mixed topics, agroforestry, all these types of issues. So we need to avoid reaching an oversimplification through the digitalization of agriculture. I think that's the issue. So fortunately, I'm getting confused. So let's give it back to Mariana. But I think that public policies need to design balanced kind of programs that encompass all types of students, from technical schools for farmers up to university.
Thank you, Lorenz. You made me think about something that's going to maybe make me pass on to Mariana an even more difficult question. You were mentioning how, and this is happening in public policy, this return to, let's say, indigenous practices of agriculture, because some of them are very good and they have a lot of foresight for, you know, generations and generations of how to produce. But at the same time, some of that may be restricting the use of new technologies and new innovations and the acceptance of change, which we see often in public policies where some governments are saying, we do not want this new technology, even though this technology is going to help our productivity and it's going to help our farmers be more successful. So we have this, you know, this yin and this yang that's happening today in public policy. Mariana from Brazil, a huge producer, one of the largest in the world, probably soon to be the largest in the world of just about everything. But also having this dynamic of those who are very pro innovation and technologies, and some of those who are smaller farmers and want to protect their maybe indigenous ways of life. Any perspective from you on how digital agriculture, how public policies ought to be responding to all of this?
Yes, I do not think they're opposite. So I do believe a lot that there is a lot of knowledge on what has been passed through generations, and a lot of knowledge in the reality of the indigenous communities. And that's also science. Actually, here, like in the Climate Week, they call it indigenous science, right? So there, the way we approached it in my company was that we don't need to, we actually have to unite and scale. So we built the first step of documenting knowledge. So if all of this knowledge of how they see the world and what they have been doing that has been working. Why don't we document it and we start collecting that way of practicing and seeing time so you can transfer that easier, continue in the same way to allow the space for learning. If we're measuring and we see that something is not working out, or if you compare that to different practices, you can use that to leverage knowledge. And I have personally seen some presentations from the X Prize focusing, for example. So you saw a lot of indigenous success, indigenous young people is starting to document biodiversity Amazon or of the trees and use the source and leverage their knowledge as well. So I don't see them as opposite. I see we can use them to document and learn from the ancestrality and the indigenous knowledge and compare and contrast like more driven, we understand science driven and learn from both and continue from there. So I do think that investing in indigenous community knowledge is something very important.
Thank you very much, Mariana. Lawrence, as we came into the room this afternoon, we were talking about some of the challenges that digital agriculture has in terms of not quite grounding itself because of the challenges of farming, be it weather or wind or fire or ground, turf, flooding, etc. And in my conversations with some of the investors in digital agriculture, they've focused mostly on investing in the business processes. How do we enhance those, because those are an easier win to start off with, and some of the more technological, how do we analyze all this data when some of this data has to deal with clouds and storms and animals and just things breaking. You need a person, and as Mariana was talking about indigenous culture and knowledge. I mean, you could apply that term indigenous to just about any farmer. Any farmer knows his land better than probably some of these tools do. Not in all cases, obviously. There's a lot of information that we're going to get from the new tools of digital agriculture, but how do we incorporate and ensure that that farmer knowledge somehow continues? And how do we it's a complex question, but you're a complex academic from Wageningen, and you probably have thought about this in ways that many of us haven't. How do you share your expertise with this group of ag techs from around the Americas about how they need to be thinking about working with the farmer on this, that their solutions are farmer friendly and farmer centric in order to take their knowledge as well?
Bueno, Michael.
Well, Michael Kremer said user-centered design, or I think this is key. And in that process, to find materials and designs that are inexpensive, easy to repair, and also create a network, for instance, for repairs that is linked to the platform. For instance, if you have a platform, the ways to repair. As I've said before, not trying to be so high tech in that regard, to work with robust materials. I have a colleague who said, it's very interesting that these climate sensing devices that meteorological centers use, they have these devices to measure humidity and wind. Almost all of these are made out of plastic. In Chile, we have brutal UV radiation, and these burn out in a year. How come no one has thought of making it out of aluminum? So he, working with some producers, he invented a center to measure climate that we call in Chile, that is dog meat, very robust, I would say in Chile. So we call it dog meat, carne pero, very durable. It never breaks. So that's the type of solution we must pursue. And over there also helps working with large companies that have been in agro for a long time, that know a lot about these conditions because their machines were designed for that purpose. So I believe that this user focus design is key, is very key, and possibly encourage for certain producers to create some crowdfunding and find other models to help innovative producers for them to have skin in the game, that have an interest for them to have a win out of this. In Holland, we've seen some producers that became, because of their advance in these matters, because of their own interest, because of their innovations, uh, own innovations, because they also experimented with precision agriculture, who became leaders, advisors, and now they have a business model. Besides being producers, they advise others. So there's a lot of things that could be used from those who are very tech savvy. And without a doubt, there are some ag techs that already have these partnerships.
Thanks. That's a really good point. I know that during your time here, you're going to have the ability to go see our Fab Lab and our CMAG, which is Center for Interpretation of the Future of Agriculture, where we bring kids from all over Costa Rica to get excited about technology and innovation in agriculture so that maybe someday they'll create a business for their parents or for their community that will then be able to expand and to grow. And you talked a lot about monopolies and about big companies and the lack of competition, but also those big companies are investing in these ag techs because they know that the good ideas are probably going to come from, you know, the young people in this room rather than necessarily the folks that they're paying on their payroll. And so there's a synergy that happens there. Mariana, over to you. What's your perspective on the subject that Lorenz was just discussing?
I think like he think about something very important, that is the collaboration of expertise and knowledge. And I think like in one side, when we talk about acceleration programs, education programs for entrepreneur, is actually allowing them to be close to the farmers, so absorb that knowledge firsthand, that they actually create for a problem and test their product and reiterate very quickly. An important aspect. But he also made me think how in Latin America we deal with innovation in universities and public institutions. When we talk about the Embrapas, the INTAs, but also the public universities in the US is a very common model, business model, where the professors can be partners in companies. And as the professors can be partners in companies, many times the knowledge to scale through a technology or entrepreneur that wants to take that out, or they even become the angel investors of those business. So that's like, that makes me think about the public policy part on how to rethink the way we do collaborations and innovations with the university, public-private partnerships, and allow professors to be engaged and to make money from it. Not only professors, but researchers. Because personally, from my experience in Brazil, especially, common in the past, but right now it's a lot of action policies in place, which I understand why they exist. But I think there should be a better way to do it, because that blocks a lot the collaboration.
Thank you, Mariana. I think that's a really good point. I know that in a panel we had here many years ago, we lamented the fact that the number of projects that took place in the centers of innovation or the centers of research, especially in the public centers of innovation, those projects that actually got to implementation on the farm was really small. And so by those investigators and researchers having some skin in the game, like you discussed, the potential for that to actually get implemented onto the field is much higher. I'd like to ask our guests here, the ag techs from around the hemisphere, if they have any questions that they might like to ask these two esteemed individuals. We have a lot of time still. We could always end early, but I think it'd be good to get some both comments and questions from you all, and not too long, but some ideas for these two to think about and maybe respond, to maybe set the tone about thinking about the future of agriculture. So with that, please raise your hand. And Randy, I don't know if we have microphones for the audience. We do? Okay, so raise your hands if you have questions. Take your time. Any language except for Chinese.
Muy buenos días, mi nombre es Edwin Orozco y soy miembro del equipo de Innovovino. Hemos desarrollado una aplicación para trabajar con ganaderías y, bueno, hacer más fácil la administración de las ganaderías. Y ya estamos en varios países de Latinoamérica, pero en este tema particular hemos visto una situación muy interesante y que está acorde con lo que se está hablando, que es el nivel de escolaridad de los ganaderos, en este caso particularmente, porque ya se ha hablado de que la edad es bastante avanzada en el caso nuestro, digámoslo así, de los ganaderos, pero la escolaridad también es diferente en varios países. Entonces ese es un tema, me parece a mí, que también se tiene que poner en la mesa de cómo las instituciones van a tener que trabajar. Porque obviamente estamos apuntando al cambio generacional. Y ahí tal vez vamos a resolver esta situación. Pero en este momento, que todavía ese cambio va a ser lento, la escolaridad, o sea, nos hemos topado muchos ganaderos que incluso no saben leer ni escribir. Entonces, ¿cómo van a hacer? ¿Cómo van a accesar a las nuevas tecnologías? Ese es mi punto. Gracias.
Gracias. Otra pregunta, comentario.
Aló, acá. Me presento, mi nombre es María Teresa Pino, soy encargada de cooperación internacional en el Instituto de Investigaciones Agropecuarias de Chile. Y muy interesantes las preguntas, muy interesantes las respuestas. Y respecto al rol de las políticas públicas, quisiera hacer algunos comentarios que podría ser interesante. Cuando preguntamos qué hacen las políticas públicas, uno de los temas que surge es que los gobiernos tienen que dar las condiciones habilitantes para que se pueda implementar el tema de agricultura digital. Aquí anoté algún par de ideas. Uno es fomentar la innovación. Algo muy importante que se mencionó poco es hacer la inversión en todo lo que es infraestructura digital para que los agricultores pequeños, especialmente, que son los más débiles, tengan acceso a la tecnología. Otro rol importante, que lo mencionaba recientemente el colega, es los gobiernos tienen la necesidad de asegurar la educación y la capacitación para evitar digamos, lo que se llama alfabetización digital, porque si no logramos esto, la brecha va a ser mayor y obviamente vamos a tener más desigualdad entre los agricultores, marco regulatorio, apoyo financiero y ciberseguridad, protección de datos y tal vez lo más importante, fomentar lo que hoy día se está haciendo aquí en esta sala, la colaboración público-privada, que es muy, muy relevante para sacar este tema adelante. Solamente quería complementar y dar la importancia y la mirada que tenemos nosotros como instituciones de investigación y desarrollo en nuestros países y en el Cono Sur.
Muchas gracias. Buenos puntos. ¿Hay otro? Allá, por favor, de pie.
Hola, buenos días. Mi nombre es Danilo Miranda. Soy fundador de Bloomspal, uno de los startups de la primera semana de la agricultura digital. Yo tengo una duda, pues quería hacerles una pregunta em, respecto a lo siguiente. Y aquí hablando sobre el futuro de la agricultura y cuáles son las políticas que en general se tienen que tomar para cambiar las cosas, no solamente en los mercados consumidores, sino también en los países productores. Y es la siguiente. Actualmente nosotros estamos viendo una realidad y es que hay un oligopolio en la agricultura. Digamos, en los países consumidores como Estados Unidos, 10 compañías manejan el 90% de todo lo que la gente consume, ¿sí? Y eso tiene unas implicaciones muy grandes, no solamente para los productores, sino en general para los mercados. Em, Actualmente, digamos, en Estados Unidos, poder montar una marca emergente de food and beverage es bien difícil, ¿no? El acceso al mercado, lo que llaman los shelf space, los distribuidores, todo está para básicamente que sean las mismas marcas las que la gente termina consumiendo. Y si uno ve eso hacia los productores, pues los productores tienen un par de compradores que consolidan lo que estas grandes marcas necesitan. ¿Qué políticas se pueden hacer para poder promover pues nuevas marcas y unas nuevas dinámicas en los mercados que permitan que pues existan nuevas economías que
Exist.
al final todo se
That
resume en
at the
que
end of the day, it's
pues,
all
el
summarized
agro
in
sea un buen negocio
for
para
agro
los
to be a
campesinos y
good
los
business
productores
and for
tengan
farmers
nuevas
and
generaciones de
producers
hijos
and
para
new
poder negocio
generations to say there's a business
y se
here
metan en ese
and for
negocio.
them to
Esa es mi
become
pregunta.
part of agro. So that's my question.
Muy buena pregunta.
Well,
Entonces,
very good question. I wonder if there are any other.
no veo dónde.
Hola, buenas.
And good morning.
¿Dónde estás? Por favor, de pie.
Where you please stand? Yes. I have a question, but first I wanted to ask regarding this dynamic. Is each question going to be answered individually? No, we're going to give them the floor and they will answer to all the things they listened. I'm Paula Ponte. It's a pleasure. I'm from Curuatec, which is an ag tech that will be presenting this week. My question is that we spoke a lot about data, how to make technology to be inclusive. So my question is twofold. First, how do you make data actionable? And two, how do you make technology to be inclusive and implemented? Thank you. And one more. Good morning. My name is Uber Petty. I'm from the first rounds or the first edition from Mexico. And my question is more like food for thought. Thinking about the future, we spoke a lot about the benefits and investments in all digitalization systems. And my field experience is that producers see it more as a cost. And we speak more about digitalizing, but are we providing benefits or are we actually causing more costs? And we also spoke a lot about financing, how to seek financing for startups. But my reflection goes a little beyond that. I don't know if you have any opinion on the role of consumers and how far the producers are benefit or users. So how far do the benefits go for them? Or if these requirements, how many of these requirements go to the consumption? Is there any thoughts on what's the role of consumers and what role must they have in financing or absorbing or supporting those investments? Thank you very much. And final question.
Bahamas. My question, little twofold, and it goes towards the comment on indigenous science and wanting to promote that. As we move towards digitization and the implications that come with promoting digitization and funding that, is tied to that, how are we ensuring that there's no erasure of that indigenous science and not just digital dumping into our spaces? Because, for example, the Bahamas, small island, sustainable country, a lot of our farmers are older. They don't have the capacity to really engage, but we know as we bring projects and we want to bring these innovations into this space, a lot of them are reluctant because the mechanisms don't work in these spaces. The ecology is very fragile. So how do we have the win of, getting the funding and bringing the innovation, but also not damaging our ecology, and how do we make sure that they're not forgotten in the way we do things in the future? Because you want the balance, but if there's no ecology, if there's no sustainability in our practices, then what are we doing this for?
Thank you. And Bahamas isn't a small island; it's hundreds of islands. So,
Joel,
there was a lot of good food for thought there. I don't know who wants to go first in their response. I was thinking one of the issues that we've been discussing that we haven't discussed too much is just basic connectivity. We did a study with Microsoft and the IDB that the connectivity still in the Americas is remote, and even trying to connect with Mariana there in the center of the universe, New York City, in Climate Week, it's going in and out. So there's still issues of connectivity. It'd be great to get all that information from Michael Kremer to the farmers, but if they don't have access to the information on their phone, we can't, use this. How are we going to address all these issues? Lauren, since you're here in the flesh, we're gonna make you speak first, and then we'll pass it over to Mariana.
Yes, here I am. I'm 100% flesh and bones. There's no metal in me. Oh yeah, I have a gold tooth. Tengo un diente oro, entonces
I have a gold tooth, so I'm becoming a machine very slowly, but surely. Very good questions. I really like these. And there were also questions regarding different topics. The gentleman over there, he spoke about app for cattle ranchers, and I think the question was very interesting. It made me think that the digital world is a world with numbers, with letters, with a lot of those that type of communication. Alongside, it provides possibilities for more audiovisual things. So I believe that for these groups, we must get outside of what's common in digital, these numbers and text and graphs, and find more intuitive ways to connect with their world in a better way, which could be in the forms of videos or avatars or that will communicate as an interactive agent with them for it to be more accessible to those who don't have the capacity to read or very low capability on reading. I think we have many examples from the health world for people who have the disabilities, intellectual disabilities. And I'm not saying that producers have intellectual disabilities or challenges, but that we do have the experience there in that sector to do things that are very accessible by means of apps and platforms, so on and so forth. So I believe we must be very creative to connect with different worlds that work for different target groups that are very difficult to inform. So I think that also requires, as was said this morning, to think out of the box. Someone said it this morning. And the colleague from Chile, I very much agree with what she said about connectivity, continues being a very important matter. I think we must also experiment, and we're doing this with offline, online models, how to combine these. That's a continuous pursuit on how to reach remote areas for telecom companies is not worthwhile investing a lot. And when you said oligopoly, say, well, that's a debate. It's actually a world wide debate, also in political arena and United Nations, many NGOs that are trying to bring this to a table for years. But in the AgTech world, something really strange happens. There's a paradox. In one sense, AgTech wants to be a disruptor, go against existing companies. On the other side, it's very independent, very dependent on financing because institutional funders or partners, they come from the same companies, and it depends on physical infrastructure, their clients. And this also is said by those who see it with a critical eye. They say it's hard to move away from that. And for this, you have to have some type of antitrust, anti-oligopoly. But that would be a total change of a political economic system. I think that would be difficult to do, but I think it's very important for AgTechs to be aware of how they relate to oligopolies and little by little start changing it. I don't know how they would do it, but I see it as a very complex topic. What else? I also like very much what you said regarding indigenous knowledge in Bahamas, right? Well, this is also very important. As we said initially, regarding data, and we have to rely more on data, but data is not ours. The data is ours, but with continuous information and knowledge is done by models, by selections of the engineers. It's done by models. Digital twins speak about assumptions about the real world. So we have to be very much on top of what's in the app, behind that technology, and possibly find ways to program this knowledge in something digital if possible and change that scheme. There's certain representations of data, of expertise is used, and others are excluded. I think without a doubt, there is a world of indigenous ICTs that could be used through digital agriculture to use that knowledge. It also made me think about singularity. That's something that in 100 years will live forever because we're going to be in a supercomputer. But what's going to be in that singularity? What's going to be in that knowledge? How can we record and digitalize and even preserve that for the future? Now we have gene banks and seed banks. How can we digitalize that tacit knowledge and not as written knowledge to not lose it? This has also been done with languages that are about to be lost or die. That included Cosmovision, which is also a challenge. And maybe for AgTechs, it won't be interesting because it's going to be a very niche market, hopefully. I don't know, because indigenous groups in some countries is very large. These are very large groups, but there's also has to be a justification from the public sector. I think I spoke a lot. Now I give the floor to Mariana. And thank you, Lawrence. I think that the key word in your discussion in answering your question is how can you be disruptive? And in that regard, I was thinking after our presentations, we always have Steve Ballmer from Microsoft saying that this iPhone has no chance. No one will use this because it doesn't have a keyboard. That's what he would say. And he missed that. But how can AgTech be disruptive to improve that or make a change from that oligopoly of those 5 companies that that own the world? I was thinking that today I received an email from an AgTech that wants to do things in Bahamas with funding to eliminate the middleman because they could do everything through blockchain. I think there will be some things that will hopefully change and disrupt that system. And Mariana, you have the final word.
Bueno, yo creo que cuando
Well,
miramos
I
las
think that
preguntas
when
en
we
general,
see all these questions, they have similar things. I understand it's not a technology challenge per se, it's a business model challenge. When you speak about connectivity, as Lauren said, that infrastructure is required. When you speak about oligopoly, at the end, it's a matter of access to distribution channels and connect to the final user. And all these things happen from rethinking the incentives model. I think there are opportunities available, and we have to be creative to find solutions. And when we rethink how to dematerialize, decentralize, and democratize access, and that's what's been happening with the economy from Uber, from and which are the barriers? These are physical and financial. How can we do away with these barriers by rethinking the business model and rethinking the ecosystem of incentives and connecting directly with the consumers, the marketplace, access to capital, venture capitalists? There's a number of brands that weren't known, that were not the CPGs that are there that consumers have, that they become trendy to do things online to be closer to the consumer. And regarding not leaving anyone behind, when we think about doing this, I think there's there's space in society to start a company, especially in AgTech, that is not a social business, that you're not only thinking of how to make money, but also how to cause an impact. And you might say, we're going to assume the cost as a society. We're going to divide the cost of connectivity between the government, large companies, between the consumer. So we have to be very much on the side of what? How are we going to do this? Like in the B Corp in our mains, with the perspective of sustainable development goals, and these things can be done with small margins to allow me to grow.
I think that they're telling me to stop because I'm talking too much. Well, looks like can kill. Thank you very much, Mariana. Thank you very much, Lawrence. I think this panel was extremely interesting. Thank you, Dr. Michael Kremer. I think that this really sets the ground and makes us start to think for the rest of the week, identifying what opportunities we face and what challenges we must face, what we need to cooperate on in order to make it forth and really get out of these issues that public policies face, not just in Latin America, but to progress the future of agriculture. On all of the companies represented here were investing their time and their money and their really blood in working on these efforts. I ask you for a round of applause for the members of our panel. Thank you very much. Obrigado, Mariana. Dankjewel.
Federico, te paso la palabra a vos.
Federico, floor is yours. Well, thank you very much, Lloyd. Thank you, Michael Kramer. Thank you, Mariana, Lawrence, and Lloyd for moderating this panel. We've received a lot of input, and it would be hubris on our part to try to process all of this. I think that we will be focusing on these topics throughout the upcoming days, and at the end, we'll compile a sort of documents that can provide some feedback, ideas, recommendations to the ministers of agriculture and the ministries of agriculture. So we end this session here. Marian, thank you very much for being here with us. What's next? Now, what we're going to do is we're going to go downstairs where we had our coffee break today, the main ICA lobby, for a more icebreaker type activity. We get to know each other a little bit more. We thank Oriana and Brian from Visuality Colombia, ACTEC, who participated last years, and they undertook the commitment of spearheading this activity which will take half an hour or so, and then we're breaking for lunch. We have an hour and a half for lunch to enjoy ourselves, have a little conversation. Let's chat, because tomorrow lunches will involve work. Well, not a little bit more work, but actual work.
Bueno, creo que nada más. No sé si Carlos, Alicia, me estoy olvidando.
Well, am I forgetting something? No, then let's go downstairs to the central lobby. We have an icebreaker activity, and then we're heading off for lunch. Lunch is in a building that is in front of this one where we're currently at right now, about a block away. It's close by.